Hello there, everybody. My name is Ashley Hunt. I'm the Senior Project Management Instructor here at StormWind, and I want to talk to you today about 4 reasons that most IT projects fail and how Agile can help. If you're not familiar with Agile, it's really a different way of looking at project work. Even if you're doing a full-blown, predictive, front-loaded, pre-planned type of project, you can still utilize Agile best practices in a hybrid to help overcome some of these reasons why IT projects fail. So the very first thing is lack of proper planning. And you can plan in an Agile project. There's this misnomer that Agile projects don't plan at all. We do. We have an entire iteration planning meeting in the beginning where we plot out the next 2 weeks or the next month, depending on our iteration length. And that focus on just this area of time really helps us plot it out. But I get it. On a predictive, front-loaded plan type of project, meaning you know what the end result is going to be. We're installing servers at XYZ locations. You can still put together a plan that you can execute, but also use Agile to help supplement it. Failure to manage scope creep. The dreaded scope creep. It happens. It doesn't matter if you have formal change control or not. Scope creep is going to happen. Those uncontrollable, unformal changes that sort of throw a wrench into your entire project. Overly optimistic project schedules, because that never happens. You have customers, you have senior management that are like, that should take 3 months, and you're, it's going to take 5. So I don't know where you came up with 3 months. So that's a very difficult aspect of all projects. Doesn't even matter if it's an IT project. And then poor communication. Although I feel like these days in a virtual environment, we're doing a better job communicating either via video chat or Zoom meetings or Teams and so on, that working from home for a lot of us that need to interact is really driving better communications. But if you're thinking to yourselves, not really in my world, poor communication can really be detrimental, not only to our projects, but to our interactions with the people that we work with. So lack of proper planning. Typically on the Agile side of things, we only plan out 1 month or 2 weeks. Typical iteration lengths are either 2 weeks or a month, and they stay that way. So 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 month, 1 month, 1 month. And what we do is we discuss, what are we going to have at the end of this iteration? Typically in an Agile environment, we're trying to produce or release something that is done or usable. For example, a type spell check print type of software program, we're going to release type in iteration 1, spell check iteration 2, and so on, so that it can be demoed, it can be reviewed, and possibly released. When you see the word sprint, that's really attributable to Scrum, which is one of the frameworks of Agile. But if you think of the word sprint, you're running really quickly, but you're not getting very far, right? And that's why we're only planning for that sprint. Doesn't mean we're not thinking ahead, doesn't mean we don't have a long list of work that we have to do, but we also accept that changes will occur. So we just want to focus on that one time frame. And once that one time frame is over, we'll talk about retrospectives here in a minute. Once that time frame is over, then we go right back into sprint planning again, and then we focus on the next 2 weeks or the next month. Sprint planning for 1 month is usually about an 8-hour meeting. That sounds excessive to a lot of people that are, what? I only have a 2-hour planning meeting, and that's okay if you can get everything done in that meeting that you need to really plot out how the rest of those 2 weeks or a month are going to go. Like I said, for shorter sprints, like if it's 2 weeks, it's probably only going to be a 4-hour meeting. Now, the Scrum Master is a coach, a facilitator. They're a servant leader. They're going to be the ones that ensure that the event takes place. If you don't practice true Agile, then chances are that's going to be the project manager. That's going to be you, the IT manager. And so your job is going to make sure that, hey, we get what we need to get done, we keep it in the time frame that we've set, and we really focus on getting those plans together. We're trying to decide what can be delivered at the end of this 2 weeks. How will we achieve that work? Even if you're using Gantt charts, even if you're using, some other type of Gantt chart or scheduling softwares, you can still work within the scope of work and plot it out, at least for the next foreseeable future. Failure to manage scope creep. Okay, we know. It happens. Formal change control, yes, on the predictive side of the house. But having a clear definition of done, meaning what are we going to have when we're finished this 2 weeks? What is the goal? We also want to limit work in progress, which is called WIP. If you're not familiar with that, it might sound counterintuitive to limit the amount of work that you're doing in any given time. All that really means is don't cram too much work into a specific time frame, because then you will not get it done. It's the equivalent of cramming too much laundry into your washing machine and hoping everything gets clean. It doesn't. So if we can plot out, this is the work that we're doing, accomplish it, done, accomplish it, done, then you'll actually get more work done. The other thing is to practice continuous improvements. We call this Kaizen, or change for the better, Kaizen, continuous improvements. And that's just not about quality entirely. It's also about how do we change how we're doing things? What can we do better? Let's specifically document it out. And in a lot of cases, you can use Kanban. I gotta tell you, Kanban absolutely changed the way that I looked at scheduling, because Gantt charts stress me out. But Kanban is absolutely one of these things where not only did it start in the 40s, but it's now being pulled into it. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's a new concept. It's not. It actually started at Toyota after World War II. And so what the Toyota factory wanted to do was see what American car manufacturers were doing. And when they came to Detroit to see what we were doing in the United States, they went into an American grocery store and they were stocking the shelves. And one thing that they noticed was that future supply is guaranteed. You pull a gallon of milk and dunk, another one comes down. And they took that philosophy of a pull system and developed just-in-time manufacturing. So it influences Agile, but I also know tons of project managers that are using either electric Kanban boards, or they're using a whiteboard with Post-it notes. Well, however you do it, it is the simplest way to schedule, and it influences Agile methodologies and frameworks, because that pull system, Kanban board, allows us to pull work in progress and then move it to done. So Kanban, signboard or billboard, an English queue limitation, a scheduling system for just-in-time production, and it was designed to control logistical chain from a production point of view to inventory control. And I always think about that I Love Lucy episode where Lucy and Ethel are working at the chocolate factory, and the chocolate's coming down so quickly, and they're like stuffing it in their mouths and in their hats and in their pockets, and it's just flying through. So we want to limit the work in progress so that we can get more done and pull more work in when we're ready. Just as a very easy example of Kanban or a Kanban board, just imagine these swim lanes, and you can use whatever titles you want at the top, but backlog is the list of work that needs to be done. And we use either Post-it notes or an electronic Kanban board. Then the team will select the work that they're going to work on in a specific time frame and then pull it into development. If it does need sign off or acceptance or something like that, then that would be the next step. And then when it's done, and then you deploy it out or release it in the case of software types of functionalities. But either way, you're moving work through the just-in-time, through the Kanban flow. And the Kanban cards are a key component of this. They signal the need to move either materials or work, and it allows for optimizing the workflow. They also signal what work is going to be done next, and that's part of the planning. So we're not using necessarily a Gantt chart type of situation where you link work. You're saying, here's all the work that we're going to do. We're going to pull each work piece into progress. Some are familiar with user stories. Typically, user stories are used in Agile, and they're represented as a user, I need or want XYZ so that I can do or so that I get. And that gives the team the understanding of not only what are they doing, but who are they doing it for, and they pull that work into progress. Speaking of which, overly optimistic project schedules can really throw a wrench into the operations. A lot of times in a predictive project, we know we're going in sideways because we have maybe a customer or senior management or somebody that has this overly optimistic view of how much work we can get done. That's called ideal time. and it's not ideal for the team that's working on the project. So we can also use that Kanban approach to limit work in progress and at the same time practice continuous improvements. The more work and the more improvements, the more you're going to get done. So you'll be able to pull more work into progress as you get better and better, and then the design is emergent. You know what you're building. Retrospectives are an excellent way to go back and review what you've done in the past 2 weeks or month. Doesn't matter. There's no wrong way to do a retrospective, even on a predictive project. The problem is, most predictive projects, we release something at the end, then we go into a lessons learned meeting and talk about all of the things that went sideways. We're like, don't, that was bad. We won't do that again. Whereas retrospectives are set every 2 weeks or every 1 month, where the entire team gets together and says, what should we stop doing? What did not go well? What should we start doing? Where's our continuous improvement? Let's make a plan for implementing 1 to 3 things into the next time period, if you will. What should we keep doing? What went really, really well? The beauty of a retrospective is it allows us to focus on the immediate past and the immediate future. And that way we can start to better rev up our not only our productivity, but also try and reduce risk and make sure that we don't have scope creep and all of those things. And for the first retrospective, it's definitely going to be, it's casual anyway, but for the first retrospective, it might feel a little weird because you've never done this before. But treat it like a mini lessons learned meeting and encourage everybody to be open about their communication. What do you think went really well? What do you think didn't? Let's be honest about this and practice continuous improvement. Different ways to gather information, and take this with a grain of salt. I mean, it's really what you need and what your team needs to discuss. But let's look at commonalities in what occurred in the iteration. What were some themes? Triple nickels is identifying 5 issues in 5 minutes 5 times. So that allows us to really brainstorm some of the things that went sideways, and hopefully you don't have 25 issues that you had to deal with, but ultimately it gets the conversation started. And then timelines, what did the timeline look like? Did we get enough work done? Are we going to get more done going forward? What does our schedule look like compared to the amount of work that we have to do and the work that we have in progress? The other thing that's fairly important is root cause analysis. This happens for risks, this happens for challenges or things that we're trying to adapt or change. And one of the ways to do that is by using what's called a fishbone diagram or an Ishikawa diagram. Dr. Kaiu Ishikawa created it, and it looks like a fishbone. But, people like me can't draw, so we use this as more of a guide to try and reach the actual root cause. So let's say you have low customer satisfaction, you're trying to figure out why. There could be a multitude of reasons. It could be that your pricing's too high, that your quality is low, that you have poor support. So we're going to look at all these potentials and then start to drill down and find really the one. And it could be all 3, but we're trying to focus on areas that we can fix going forward quickly. So ineffective marketing, maybe can't control that. Cost of materials, maybe we can't control that. Bad design, we can control that. Poor support, wrong answers, long hold times, fee structure. We can't maybe control the fee structure, but we can implement training and checklists and things like that to try and control some of that and improve going forward. The 5 whys was created at Toyota as a way to reach the root cause. And the thought process is that if you say why 5 times in a row, why, like act like a 2-year-old, you will get to the root cause of the issue. And that then allows you to focus forward and say, all right, here we know the issue. How are we going to fix it? Now, if you ever went to SMART training, and most managers have, this is not something that is unfamiliar to a lot of people, but if you think about keeping your New Year's resolutions, most people do not keep their New Year's resolutions for very long. And the reason why is because they're not specific, they're not measurable. We don't even know if they're attainable because they're not specific or measurable. Are they relevant to what it is that we're trying to accomplish? And what's the time frame that we're trying to accomplish this? So a New Year's resolution might be, I want to get healthy. I want to make more money. I want to do X, Y, Z. And we never quite get there because we don't plot out our goals effectively. I use SMART metrics with my team. I use it with my own personal goals, and I have to ask myself, is it specific enough that I can actually plot out a strategy? How do I measure my progress? And can I even do this? Is it even attainable for me right now? Is it relevant to what's going on in my world, my projects, and so on? And what is my time frame for delivery? So those are just some of the things that you can utilize Agile and a mix of predictive to sort of Frankenstein your own hybrid together and try and improve some of these reasons why IT projects fail. And I'm always a big fan of not implementing more than 3 things at any given time because it's too much. So take 1 or 2 or 3 of these things, maybe try out a retrospective, maybe set goals with SMART if you're not already, and try and improve your projects and reduce the probabilities that your projects are going to fail. So hopefully that helped and that you got some good information out of that you can use today. Closing out the retrospective, this is going to be important, right? So we also want to make sure that we're reflecting on the discussions we're planning going forward. We're using those SMART metrics and so on to try and plot things out, gain valuable feedback, try and figure out what steps are next. Your team can do self-assessments too, like check themselves. If they're wrecking themselves, they can say, hey, we need to change this or that. And that's an important aspect of using those SMART metrics and plotting forward so that you can say, all right, in our next iteration, in our next quarter of the year, these are the things that we're going to be doing. Team appreciations are also important. We could do help, hindered, hypothesis, what helped us, what hindered us, how are we going to fix it, plus or delta, do more of this, do less of that. These are just examples or guidelines, but a lot of my retrospectives are not free-for-alls, but they're open conversations with a very gentle agenda. And that allows us to really focus on what just happened and move forward with the best opportunities for improvement. So again, hopefully that helped you guys and you're able to implement a couple of these things going forward on your next projects. And ultimately, Agile is as malleable and adaptable and easy to implement as just Agile projects in general. So try a couple of those things, see how they work for you, and hopefully they will improve all of those reasons why IT projects can ultimately go sideways.